stuck. And it's amazing to watch the speed. I've been an anarchist for 18 years. And I can tell you that 10 years ago, I knew maybe half a dozen people who would dare to call themselves anarchists. And now I know thousands and thousands who have figured out the problem is the guy at the door who said, just let me dominate you and your neighbors. It isn't that it wasn't the right guy at the door. It isn't that you chose Bubba instead of him. It's that you accepted the idea that that can ever be legitimate. And that is going away, and it will all the way go away. When people ask me, like, well, what are the chances that we'll ever have a society without government? 100%. Absolutely 100%. I don't know exactly how long it will take, but it is 100% for the same reason that it was absolutely destined to be that eventually society would stop thinking the earth was flat. Because the truth is going to stare them in the face until they figure it out. And when they figure it out, they're never going back to the lie. And when people figure out the lie underlying authoritarianism in government, they don't go back. Which means it's a one-way thing. And where, people who understand it are a small minority, but growing, it isn't ever going to go back the other way.
That's amazing.
It will expand until everybody recognizes that government is basically Santa Claus only with 200 million dead people. And when they figure that out, they aren't going back to that lie ever again. So we will have a society without government. I would just like to get there really fast and minimize the destruction that happens in the meantime as the control freaks try to hang on to their power.
I have a favorite question that always asks the state that always scratches their heads, and I want your opinion.
Okay.
What the hell is government?
Good. The favorite question to ask status is, what is government? And I do that too. I ask it all the time. Well, it's sort of something. And somebody actually did talk about this, and somebody made a little alien video called Government Explained. I like his version better than mine. And the alien comes to Earth and asks, like, hi, here I am. And the guy says, should I take you to our leader? Your what? The leader. The guy in charge. You're in charge of what? In charge of everything. One guy in charge of everything. And he goes through, and the alien is trying to understand what this government thing is, and the guy's trying to explain it. Well, it's not really the buildings, it's not the books. And it's sort of the politicians, but not really. And people don't know. And the thing is, when you try to get them to actually define it, you start to see that it really is a religious belief. Yep. I used to think the belief in government was analogous to a religious belief, and then I realized it's not an analogy. It is a belief in a superhuman entity that you can't see, that has rights that human beings don't have, that gives commands that it's a sin to disobey. That's called a God. And I believed in it for a lot of my life. That's really embarrassing. Most of what I do now is try to talk other people out of the goofy thing that I accepted. Because it is totally a faith-based belief in a mythical deity. And most people don't see it that way, obviously, because as soon as they see it that way, they myself.
I think I can tell you what government is, but it begs another question, and please ask me. Government is the administration of the state, right? Or by extension, the administrators of the state. And of course, the question is, what is the state?
Yeah.
We're not going to be given that definition anywhere. We used to have a radio show called The Bear Truth, right? That's what Andy Martin said. Okay, Washington said that government is not reason or eloquence, it's force. Chairman Mao said it's that political power grows out of the barrel of a gun. One is poetry, the other is prose. But there's a clear enough definition of the state, and unfortunately it's real. The state is the organization of coercive power over a territory. That's what the state is. You can pick any state you like. Not Nevada, that's not even a province anymore. But the Roman Empire or Hitler's Germany or the United States of America, they're all organizations of coercive power. Unfortunately, coercive power isn't a myth, it's very real. It's all too real.
But you missed an ingredient. He was basically saying how the state is an organization of coercive power, which is certainly true, but you missed the fundamentally great
psychological power is added to it, but without psychological power you can still have the state.
No, you can't.
You can't,
Well, the state is in your mind, that's all it is.
What?
That's all it is, it's in your mind.
I'm sorry for that.
like, instead of, like, we can argue about what the word state means, the word government is defined as the exercise of authority over a people or place. Authority is the right to rule, not just the ability. People don't call the Bloods and Crips government because they don't think they have the right. So you left out the ingredient of pursuit of legitimacy.
Psychological power, and it's in a chunk. The Union Army had no psychological powers in big chunks of Alabama. They were still the government during Reconstruction.
Well,
Because they had a brute force. Now, governments love psychological power. They will go on their knees to churches and the modern churches' television. But it's not the necessary definitive ingredient of government. Government is coercive power. Psychological power is its help or its aid or it's a better or it's everything else.
but it isn't government without authority. In the case where one group doesn't recognize that another one does, the gang is real, the guns are real, the soldiers are real, the violence is real, but nobody, the people who call it government, imagine it to be something other than just a gang of violence. They think it's a rightful, legal ruling class, even if they complain about it.
The people in Alabama in 1866 thought the Union government was a bunch of murdering thugs.
And they were
They still had to obey it.
because of the force, that doesn't make them authority.
Divine government.
No, it doesn't. Because there's a Bloods and Crips in every carjacker when he got
Government in Alabama.
they forcibly control. They
Yeah,
have
by brute force, without psychological power, our authority, they're the same thing.
Yeah, the ability to violently control does not make something government.
Yes, it does. That's what government
So every carjacker is government?
No, we got it.
Why not? Yes, we go.
They don't have the power the government has. They don't have coercive power. They're not an
You don't think a
organization.
carjacker has coercive power?
I don't. It's an organization of coercive power, a permanent organization.
Mafia?
Getting very close.
They don't think it's
They can exact taxes and they're a permanent organization and they can afford you and afford you what they do. Then some of them are almost identical.
Yeah, except people don't imagine them to be authority, so they don't call it
They don't
government.
have the psychological power.
Thanks for the perfect example that authority is the ingredient to make the government. Because mafia is almost exactly the same, except its victims don't imagine it to be legitimate, so they don't call it government.
Charlemagne went to Rome in the year 800. He went down on his knees and the Pope put a kind of oil in his head and he did a whole lot of stuff over it. Like Charlemagne came back, he was still ruling the countries he conquered by brute force, but now he had this enormous psychological power to back him.
Yeah?
Governments love psychological power. They would do all kinds of things to court and mollycoddle it.
Yeah?
But it's not an essential ingredient. Government is force. George Washington said it. Government is not reason. It's not eloquence. Reason and eloquence is psychological power.
And he left out an ingredient, which I don't blame him for, because he wanted to be it. 2 seconds later, he was violently attacking people who didn't want to pay homage to him as government, as authority.
So you're arguing we won't agree with that.
I admire the optimism that someday people will lose the idea of embracing the state, but just like you alluded to and even wrote, that it's pretty much a superstitious cult. There are billions of people who believe in religion and things like that, superstitions and cults. How do you fight an idea where every day that idea is also trying to gather new followers who say it's okay? You're not really a slave, you get to play master a lot of the time too. Just like we're never going to eliminate all crime, I'm not really optimistic enough to think that we can eliminate every government entity within every district and domain.
Okay.
How will that happen?
How do you fight it? Superstitions constantly, people pushing it because they get power from it, and there are lots of other superstitions that people believe in and they follow.
Very appealing.
And it's appealing. It's a way for people to get out of personal responsibility. It's a great emotional and mental crutch for a lot of people. A couple distinctions I would give. First of all, again, I can prove to any individual, I'm actually working on interactive things, so I don't have to do this one at a time, to prove to every individual that the belief in government goes against his own values. Like, it's not just, I don't like the outcome. is that every single person who believes in government has a contradiction inside his own head. He's betraying himself by believing it. And there's a lot of superstitions that's not true. I mean, if someone wants to worship a giant pink armadillo, I don't really care. He might guess, I'm going to bother to try to talk you out of it, unless you tell me that your giant pink armadillo told you to come kill me. Then we've kind of got a problem.